Video lecture is going to look at Southeast Asia and Oceania, its physical geography. Basically, what we understand is, how physical processes have shaped Oceania and Southeast Asia and Australia over millions of years, and then take a look at the different landforms in this region of the world. Now, to begin, the climate of much of this region is going to be dominated by tropical and tropical wet and dry climates. So Southeast Asia, the land portion of Southeast Asia is almost predominantly tropical wet and dry in this area. You have large stretches of it in Australia as well. And then throughout the islands, this is all pretty much going to be tropical wet. So you're talking about rainforests just extending all the way throughout there. So when it comes to, more temperate climates, climates that we're more accustomed to here in the United States of America, just a few areas in this part of the world, mostly that of far northern Southeastern Asia, and then really just the easternmost portion of Australia. So one thing about these climate zones and the preponderance of rainforest in the area is that it's really going to limit agriculture. So throughout the region that we refer to as Indonesia, throughout this country right here, they have a lot of land. The problem that they've had for the longest time, though, is developing commercial agriculture to provide plenty of food, not only for their own population but also to export to the rest of the world for money. The rainforested areas, as well as the volcanic activity, really makes this soil pretty much useless for agriculture. This area, since human beings started settling in it, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, has been limited really to subsistence agriculture, agriculture to just pretty much feed the farmer and his family, and, shifting subsistence agriculture at that. So that basically means slash and burn. So farmers go in there, they'll cut down rainforests, they'll plant, they'll get probably a couple to 10 years use out of it at the most, and then they're having to move on to another region. Now, Australia, one of our continents, it does have plenty of land. There is land and soil in that area, on that continent that's, capable of agriculture. Their big problem, though, is rainfall. So when we look at Australia, agriculture is really just limited to the far westernmost regions of the continent. So this area right here shaded in green. You can do some livestock, you can get into some limited agriculture in the semi-arid regions, but the vast majority of the continent is pretty much desert. And this is what we refer to as the outback, that large inland area that lies on a high plateau that gets very little rainfall throughout the year. And so the Aborigines, the original population, they learned to deal with this, when they first started settling there. There's a lot of evidence of extensive irrigation that they used to plant, but even they, on the interior of the continent, were really limited to just hunting and gathering. The only place that really has a climate that comes anywhere close to what we have here in the United States of America would be the archipelago nation of New Zealand right here. That's pretty much it. In that island also has a lot of highlands region, so their major industry in terms of agriculture has been and always probably will be just sheep or livestock raising. So these are the main geographical areas. Of course, there is one more that's not shown on this map, and that is Antarctica in the far, far, far south. It's pretty much everything just what you would call a polar desert. Not a lot in terms of precipitation. When it does, of course, just pretty much snow, a lot of wind. Very little has learned to live on that continent. Although there is evidence, from scientific explorations on the continent that have dug deep below the ice, the icy surface and into the actual ground beneath it, that at one point it did actually have a lot of ice. In fact, it was at one point, millions of years ago, home to a tropical ecosystem and an abundance of animals. Now, throughout this region, the one big challenge that they're coming into in the modern era is, of course, global warming. As temperatures continue to increase, as climates shift in terms of their, getting hotter, as we have more ice caps that are melting and ocean levels rise, some of these islands are in danger of losing a lot of their land mass to rising sea levels. And it's not just simply, the little islands that lay out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You're talking about other areas as well. So a lot of these islands out here, they are in direct danger. In some cases, the low island atolls are completely disappearing. But then you have other areas as well, like the far southern tip of Malaysia, that could lose a lot of its land mass as well. So that's a big challenge for this part of the world going into the 21st century. So what we're looking at over here on this map in the bottom right-hand corner is a prediction of what could happen as a result of rising sea levels. And we can see here that a lot of Australia is losing its coastline. A lot of these islands are disappearing under the water as well. Now, in terms of Southeast Asia, their specific geography, a lot of archipelagos. So remember, archipelagos are chains of islands. So Indonesia, the far southern country, is just one massive archipelago, as is the Philippines. They all lay within the Ring of Fire. And so this is that ring that runs around the Pacific Ocean that has some of the most intense volcanic activity globally. So one of the volcanoes that we like to pay attention to is this one right down here. That's Krakatoa. In the late 1800s, it had such an intense eruption that countries around the world recorded dipping temperatures, a lot of soot in the air. So it made global records before there was even global communication. This is the Southeast Asia in terms of rainfall, dense, a lot of dense rainforest, a lot of tropical wet and dry, and they do have some major river systems as well. These include, the Irrawaddy out here in the far west, the Salween, the Mekong River, which provides a boundary, between Laos and Thailand, and provides this major delta area down here that's a breadbasket for a large section of Vietnam. In terms of agriculture, again, a lot of subsistence agriculture, a lot of shifting agriculture. And then some other major features that we can take a look at is, here on the Malaysian Peninsula. This is a site of a lot of modern-day business activity. So these countries, they used to be colonized by the Dutch and by the French and by the English. And then there was a period after independence in the following the 1940s when they were struggling to find their footing. But now they're emerging as some of the biggest markets in the world. One of which is the city-state of Singapore right here, which is basically one city that occupies a little island on the very tip of the country of Malaysia. And there's so much industry that runs and so much shipping that runs through the Strait of Malacca right here that's considered one of the most important choke points for trade globally. Now, in terms of Australia and New Zealand, again, most of this massive continent here is arid, very dry. And it's also, a lot of river systems cutting through it, though, that do bring, some water to settlements, allowing, an extension of settlements into the interior. One thing about Australia is, as far as continents go, it has long since been separated from all of the other land masses in the world, which has allowed it to develop some very unique plants and animals, so unique flora and fauna. In fact, there are animals in Australia that you will not find in the rest of the world. And this concerns, scientists and nature lovers because, if things like, say, the Tasmanian devil disappear, then they're gone for good. Again, most of the settlement in Australia is limited to the more temperate areas. The more temperate areas are located out here in the east. So if you want to find eucalyptus leaves and koala bears, and most of the cities, they're going to be out in that region. Another major physical feature is the Great Barrier Reef that runs in the northeastern section of the ocean right off of the Australian continent. And this is a reef that extends well over 1,000 miles, and it's home to some of the most diverse ocean wildlife globally. And again, with global warming, temperatures in the ocean, we have noticed rises to the point, or increases to the point, that it's threatening the life of some of these coral reefs. Now, human beings started, the first waves of human beings started to colonize or settle in Australia, well over probably about 3,000 years ago. And these are the Aborigines, which other video lectures will look at. But humans from Europe started to settle this area in the late 1700s, where it served as a penal colony. And one of the big problems with settlement, European settlement, is when they came over, they brought a lot of the plants and animals from Europe into this very unique ecosystem. And these animals didn't really have any natural predators there. So that wasn't too much of a problem when it comes to things like, say, horses and cattle, because, human beings pretty much manage their population levels. But there are other animals that have proven to be a nightmare. So an example of this are rabbits. They were introduced by a settler, a wealthy settler, to have, so he could go out and conies. Eating conies or rabbits was a culinary delight in England, where he came from, and he wanted to be able to enjoy those same dishes, and so he brought these rabbits over. And the rabbits today continue to be a plague on Australia. So you can actually go out and see these videos and pictures of old settlers going out and forming these massive lines with these sticks and beating the brush, and then just basically flushing rabbits out, where they would either club them to death or shoot them or net them or do anything they possibly could just to kill off their numbers. And then in the 20th century, with the advancement of genetic knowledge and medical knowledge, they deliberately introduced a disease into the rabbit population, hoping that would kill them off. But these rabbits have proven to be very resilient. Now, the final region that we'll look at are the islands of the Pacific Ocean. In the islands of the Pacific Ocean, most of the land wildlife used to be really just bird life. So you'll find bird populations in the tropical islands, again, that are very unique to that part of the world. You do have some animals that have been introduced by European settlers over time, especially like pigs. What European settlers used to do is when they sailed by these islands, they would drop pigs off on the islands, knowing full well that the pigs would reproduce. And this would allow them, anytime they stopped by the islands, to be able to go and hunt them for pork, which they could then salt to carry on their journeys with. But again, very unique ecosystems here. Now, one thing about these islands is that we need to understand that not every island is made the same. So usually when you watch a movie that is set in a Pacific Island setting, what you're looking at is a high island, this right here. And so high island are exactly what they sound like. They're islands that rise high above the ocean surface, and they're usually formed by volcanic activity. So if you take a look at the Hawaiian Islands, that's what you're looking at when you go to Hawaii. And Hawaii is one of many archipelagos in this region. So a lot of the islands, they occur in bunches. And these bunches of islands are what we refer to as archipelagos. Other islands are low islands, and we call them low islands because they are low in elevation. In some cases only 6 feet above the surface of the ocean. So you're not talking about much elevation at all, which is why global warming is such a threat to them. And a lot of these low islands are what we call atolls. So an atoll is basically a ring of islands that is formed usually either from the remains of a volcano. So it's like the top of the volcano that's kind of been sheared off and just kind of sticks above the water. But a lot of times they're formed from corals. So deposits of earth on top of corals over years and years and years and years that eventually create this ring of small islands. And we're going to take a look at some of these societies as we go through this, especially we're going to take a look at the Bikini Atoll and what happened to that as a result of American nuclear testing and other lectures. So Southeast Asia, in terms of in Oceania, in terms of its physical features, it's very unique. It has two of the world's largest continents, Antarctica and Australia, two of the most unique continents at all as well. Keep in mind, Antarctica is the only continent that hasn't truly been claimed in terms of the land. There are a lot of countries that have claims to it because their maritime borders kind of extend down into that area. But global treaties have basically recognized it as open to everybody. Nobody's going to settle it. It's there really for more scientific observation than it is for, exploitation for resources. I have a lot of islands in this area, which challenges people learning the different countries because they're, formed up of these, small atolls or high islands or archipelagos. But still a remarkable world in terms of its ecosystem, in terms of its climate, in terms of the human populations that live there.